It's because the last couple of times I've turned this on, it's worked fine. And now it's not working.
This is a paper about the trouble that working with network technology caused us. In it, we present two stories of how in the course of doing design research into and with network technology, we encountered inarticulacy. These encounters troubled our practices of design research as a form of critical inquiry. Contrary to our expectations for such practices, things became less coherent, objects and events harder to understand, and their significance more obscure. However, this is not a paper about failure. Indeed, what we will somewhat perversely argue is that these are cases of critical inquiry that worked a bit too well in causing trouble for how we understand and work with network technology. This paper emerges from an ongoing dialogue between its two authors. While the focus of our inquiries are quite different in some ways, we both begin from a desire to use design research as a means to critically examine the social, material and cultural significance of network technology. We hoped by engaging in design research we could better articulate the ways in which such technologies shape and distribute power. In many senses, this aspiration to become more articulate is a central component of all research through design methodologies. Research through design begins in many ways from a perceived failure of design and designers to speak for themselves, be that in verbal or material form. However, our experiences have led us to reflect on whether inarticulacy also has a role to play in how critical design research finds and makes problems. With this in mind, we present two reflective accounts of encountering inarticulacy in the course of doing critical design research and how this led us to formulate new problems.
I want to make visible the technological, social and cultural life of Wi-Fi. I want to reach into the black box of this technology and make its contents visible for all to see. I decided to create a public Wi-Fi network that traded data in exchange for internet access in ways that reflect my own pragmatic negotiations of the uneven power structures of these networks. I'm not a developer or a computer scientist, but somehow I've always managed to make these kind of things work in the past, and I have a certain pride in my ability to figure it out. However, my efforts to coax the Wi-Fi router into doing what I want only lead to frustration. In theory, I know how this can be done, but somehow I can't make all the parts work together. I spend days staring into the blackness of the command line, entering in commands I only half understand. I ask around and I am told I need an enterprise level setup rather than my hacked together code running on a Raspberry Pi. But by this point I cannot face the prospect of configuring and controlling an even more complex system into doing what I want. I'm beginning to doubt the project, and I'm beginning to doubt Wi-Fi networks. I start to notice all the ways in which so-called enterprise Wi-Fi networks were unreliable, the bad security, the text-only redirects, the pop-up logins that don't quite work. And I begin to suspect that this isn't just my failure, but that Wi-Fi networking is much less smoothly engineered, much less articulate than I'd previously noticed. At this point, I am feeling similarly broken. I've lost my faith in my ability to make things work, to join and articulate parts of network systems. The thought of another day fruitlessly trying to manipulate the device into doing and saying what I want makes me feel claustrophobic, trapped. I began by wanting to open the black box of technology, but ended up feeling like I was inside one.
When on standby, my Kindle becomes an advertisement. I find this neither useful nor beautiful. I decided to digitally replace the Kindle adverts with wallpapers from Morris's Cornflower series. I assumed this would be a relatively trivial and quick intervention. It wasn't. From the first Kindle with Wi-Fi in 2011, it seemed people had devised ways to block or replace these adverts. Two broad routes were suggested: to modify the Kindle itself, or to modify its network of linked resources, to hack the collective. Two software hacks written in 2011 demonstrated that the Kindle makes HTTP web requests to an ad server which returns an image in the GIF format. The hack falsifies the identity of this server and delivers an alternative wallpaper. In 2020, I could identify my Kindle's access to this same ad server, but the image replacement hacks no longer worked. As I discovered, Amazon made an over-the-air software update in around October 2013, changing the Kindle's firmware to use HTTPS rather than HTTP. The identity of the remote server was then authenticated and the traffic between encrypted, and so the adverts remained. I could perhaps intercept the HTTPS traffic, but to do that I needed to get the Kindle to accept a certificate to verify the identity of my server. With access to the Kindle's file system, this might be possible. I would be hacking the device itself as well as its network. So, I then opened the case and soldered a connector. I had a terminal access to the Linux kernel beneath. Then a curious thing became apparent. The downloaded ad images were stored in a hidden directory accessible to my laptop when the Kindle was connected as a USB drive. I plugged the Kindle in, navigated the file system, replaced all the image files. Lo and behold, William Morris's Cornflowers filled the screen. But the blooming was brief. 20 minutes later, the Kindle had downloaded new adverts in their place. The hegemony was restored. What had my encounters with the Kindle revealed? It situated my device on a network of online infrastructure and authority. Through my interventions, I began to witness how this network resisted and enabled my efforts. While it is clearly desirable that our domestic networked stuff continues to communicate with the internet securely, the growing adoption of HTTPS means that data flows within the home become increasingly difficult to monitor or reveal. Further, connectivity renders these devices slippery and impossible to reliably articulate. Their behaviour becomes the consequence of multiple actors in the network and subject to change. That one might enact a single hack for once and for all now seems naive. It's necessarily a struggle, a toing and froing.
These stories are not simply a case of technical incompetence. We know that given enough resources, it is possible to build functioning versions of what we wanted to make. However, research through design does not ask the question of what is it possible to make in the abstract. Instead, when we engage in knowing through making, we are asking, what can we do? What our stories suggest is that it is also important to ask, how hard is it to do this? How hard is this to make? And from there, we can begin to wonder why it is so much easier to build an ad blocker rather than an ad replacer. Why is it easier to build a captive portal that takes people's data without asking than one that tries to negotiate this as a mutual exchange? Design research practices such as ours are a means to encounter materials, one that allows us to begin to feel out the possibilities offered by them. However, it also allows us to become sensitive to what these materials resist articulating. These encounters have reoriented our research practices, leading to new lines of inquiry and new concerns. David's experience revealed a much more ambiguous perspective on encrypted internet traffic as a social and technical settlement, one that allows our data to be much more secure at the cost of a network where the power is less evenly distributed. In my own, it led me to reflexively examine my agency to ethically engage with data collection with network technologies. What we gain from these encounters are not just new insights, but new ways of doing research with and into network technology. Our intention with this paper is not to argue that material explorations are better or worse than any other form of designly inquiry. Rather, our point is that while alternative methods might have saved us the specific kind of trouble we encountered in these cases, we would have still needed to go looking for trouble elsewhere. Because, for critical design, finding and staying with the trouble is the point. However, by producing articulate outcomes, be that in the form of design work or written research outputs such as this, we cannot escape to some degree instrumentalising our encounters with inarticulacy. Is it possible to retain some of the unsettling qualities of the original encounter in how we articulate what we have witnessed? We would like to suggest that design research, with its long-standing engagement with ambiguity and ambivalence, has something to contribute here. By allowing unresolved elements space within research outcomes, we can translate inarticulate encounters into forms that allow them to continue to speak in ways that invites further inventive problem-making.